Are you afraid of using the pressure canner? Well, join me and let's not be fearful anymore. Hey everyone, I'm so glad that you're joining me today as we continue down this journey of canning. So today I really want to review the items and why we pressure can. Pressure canning can be a lot of fun. There's really no reason to fear the pressure canner. I know a lot of people do, but you really don't need to. Also, before we get started, I really want to tell everyone thank you for your prayers and good words as I'm recovering from my surgery. It really has meant a lot and I really do appreciate it. So thank you very much. Okay, so pressure canning. So why do we pressure can? Well, some items, for example, green beans or your red meat, your poultry, your fish, maybe your broths or soups, they can't be done in just the water bath canner. And the reason being is because there is not enough acidity. So as your pH level gets higher, your acidity level gets lower. So if you're at a pH level of 4.6 or more, you need to use a pressure canner. And the reason being for that is because the bacteria that can grow cannot be killed or removed or lowered the risk with just the water bath canning. Because in a home situation, the only way you can reach that 240 degrees at the pressure you need, with the pressure you need and the temperature that you need to kill off that bacteria is through the use of a pressure canner. So it's really important that if you're doing things like your meats or your green beans or other vegetables, and mixes, then you need to really use a pressure canner. And why not? If you have the ability to do it and you can be more creative and you can have a more diverse variety of foods for your family, then do it. You know, it would be a really good thing to do. So you want to reach the 240 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 116 degrees Celsius, is the temperature that we need to achieve to get rid of that bacteria. As the series continues, I would really like to go over with you guys how to pressure can step by step vegetables, so green beans. I would also like to go over with you on how to do some meat. I know here pretty soon we are getting ready to do some butchering of some of our chickens. And I do plan on canning some of them just because it's so quick to just grab the jar and use the meat it's already cooked, just like you would buy canned meat in the store. So it's really good for you. And so I really want to go over kind of how to do both of those methods with you guys. When it comes to pressure canning, if you watch the video of Canning 101, I went over a lot of detail about the items that we need for the water bath canning. And you need a lot of these same items for your pressure canning. So, for example, your funnel. You need your funnel. That helps you get your items in the jar so you're not making a mess. You need your canning tongs. Canning tongs, in my opinion, are the most important part of item that you need for canning besides your actual pressure canner, because it is a great safety item. It keeps you from getting hurt. It helps you get those jars in and out safely and without burning yourself. And so I really, really recommend that you get yourself a good pair or two of tongs. The other thing you're going to need is your wand. Your magnetic wand for picking up your lids in and out. Now, I know with a lot of the lids that are made by Ball, they have made some where they say that you don't have to put them in hot water anymore. I also know a lot of people have had troubles with those lids and them not sealing appropriately. I personally still put mine in hot water, not boiling water, but hot water before I put them on my jar, and I still use my magnetic wand. So for my own personal experience, I recommend still doing the hot water, but I know that Ball says that you're not required to with their new lids. I think they're called Sure-Tight lids, or the new lids that they're doing. Okay, the other very important tool is you're making sure you have your debubbler. You want to make sure that you're getting all those bubbles out, even when you put them in a pressure canner. And you also need to make sure that you check for the appropriate headspace. Headspace is very important because you don't want your jars to bust. You don't want them to overflow. You want them to seal appropriately. You also don't want too much air getting into the jar because you have too much headspace. So make sure you have your debubbler and your headspace measure, which is nicely on the same tool. Your jars. Now with pressure canning, which is also the same for if you have your jars for your water bath canner. If your water bath canner is more than 10 minutes, you don't have to sterilize your jars. But with pressure canning, you don't have to sterilize the jars at all. You just need to make sure that you wash your jars, your lids, and your rings really, really, really good. And you want to also make sure that you check your rings. If they're not brand new, you want to make sure they don't have any rust on them. You want to make sure that they're not bent. You want to make sure that they're clean. With your lids, you want to make sure that the seal on there looks good, the little rubber part. You want to make sure that there's no dents in it as well, no nicks. For your jar, you want to make sure that you check for any cracks. You want to rub your finger around the rim, make sure that there's no nicks out there, because if there is little nicks out of there, it could cause a bad seal. So you want to make sure you check your jars really, really good. So make sure they're washed and inspected. Some other items that I tend to use while canning is I will use a big strainer just to rinse off my vegetables before I can them. I also like to use this little strainer with the handle for scooping. So say for my green beans, if I do a hot water bath before I actually put them in the jars. So if I hot pack them, I will use this to scoop them out of the hot water before putting them into my jar, and it just allows me to get more and easier than I would if I used this. And then this, the ladle, I tend to use for if I need to add some extra hot water to the jar to fill in for the headspace. I will use it to scoop the hot water. You want to make sure as well that you have your pressure canner, but also that you have the manual for your pressure canner, because every pressure canner comes with a manual and things may be done just slightly different depending on what pressure canner you have. The other thing that you want to maybe try and have, and actually I probably should have told you during the water bath canning, is just a really good reference. This is one that I have. It's the Ball Complete Home Guide Preserving. It has a lot of water bath ones in here, which is really great for the beginner, but it also has a lot of instructions about how to use the water bath canning, why we do the water bath canning the way we do it, as well as the pressure canner. And so that you just really want to have a good resource that you can always kind of look back on. So this is one that I recommend. Okay, let's move on to the pressure canners. So there are different types of pressure canners. The one I have here today is called a weighted gauge pressure canner. And all that you require is the weight. It doesn't have any external gauges that tell you the pressure. It just has the weight. So I don't want you to get this mixed up with a pressure cooker. Pressure cookers cannot be used as pressure canners. Now, pressure canner can be used as a pressure cooker, but not the other way around. So it has this little device here that has different size weights on it. And if you were to take the weights off, there we go. This by itself is 5 pounds. This is used for pressure cooking. It's not used for pressure canning. To do pressure canning, if you are 1,000, let's say if you're under 1,000 feet above sea level, you use another weight, which is another 5 pounds. So that way your weight equals 10 pounds of pressure. If you are above 1,000 feet of sea level, then you would add another 5 pounds to equal 15 pounds of pressure. It is important that you know your sea level and the amount of pounds that you need for the appropriate pressure, because otherwise your food may not cook appropriately, may not can appropriately, may not reach the proper temperature that's needed for it to seal and get the bacteria gone and preserve your food. So make sure you look up where you live what level above C that you might be. And don't just assume, because like with me, where I live in Missouri, that we're all the same amount. Because I could be different than another town. So you want to make sure that you look up what you are above sea level based on your address. Okay. With the weighted canner, you have your lid, okay, and it has, this is a Presto brand weighted canner, and it's a great one to start with. It's the one I've always used. I really like it. The other good thing about the weighted canner is you don't have to have it inspected for correct pressurization. Once you add the weights and it is the pressure that it is. Inside the lid here, you have a rubber gasket that helps to keep the air, the pressure inside, the steam inside, the air from escaping. So it's important that you always check this and make sure that there's not cracks in it, that it's not broken, that it's not missing, and that you need to add a new one, because it's really important that you have that. And if you need to replace it, you need to replace it. The other thing we have here, so the safety valve is designed to make sure that if your canner for any reason is overpressurizing, its job is to pop up and release that pressure so that way this does not overpressurize. So it is your safety net, it is your safety valve to prohibit any overpressurizing. Okay, this right here is called your vent pipe. It's right in the middle, it sticks up, and what happens is as you're pressure canning, over time you're going to see the steam come out of this. And when you get a good hard nice flow of steam coming out of there, and I usually then set it for 10 minutes, and once that 10 minutes is kind of gone and I know that it's been steaming really well, I then take my weight and I do 10 pounds of pressure where I am, and I put it on top, and all of a sudden it'll seal off. You won't have that steam escaping. But what that's doing is that is building up the pressure inside of your pressure canner so that way you can reach that desired pressure. Once that pressure, that 10 pounds of pressure is reached inside of here, this is going to start rocking back and forth, okay? And that's a good thing. You're going to hear that throughout your entire canning process, whether it be 25 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it may be. You're going to hear that tink, 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 and you want to hear that because that lets you know that you're maintaining that pressure. If it stops rocking, you're not keeping that pressure maintained. The other piece to this is the pressure indicating lock. So also once you've kind of reached that pressure, you will see this thing go boop, and it stays there. And it'll stay there during your pressurizing. It'll stay there during the process. It will also stay there as you're depressurizing. So once you have finished the process of the cooking process, the pressurizing. So say it took 25 minutes to pressurize to process your green beans. Now you have to depressurize. You do not just remove the weight off of the vent pipe, because if you do, you're going to depressurize too quickly, and what's going to happen is your jars are going to break. So you have to let it depressurize on its own. Sometimes because I have an electric stove, I will move it slightly off of the burner just to keep it from staying hot. But that's the max of what I do. Okay, so you leave this on here. When your canner has depressurized, this is going to go and it's going to pop down, and you're going to know that this is safe to open. Okay, and it is also safe to remove your weight at that time. Okay, usually what I do is I remove the weight once this is popped down, and I usually will let it sit for another 5 minutes before I then open my canner just to allow it, just in case, a little bit of extra depressurizing. So if you are processing pint-sized jars, your canner is going to take about 30-35 minutes after you've processed your jars to depressurize. So once you've turned off your timer for your processing, let's say 25 minutes, you're then going to let this sit until this pops down, which usually takes about 35 minutes. If you're processing quart-sized jars, it usually takes longer. It usually takes about 45 minutes, sometimes 50, before I've seen it depressurize. Yeah, so it takes time, and I know it's really, 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 really hard not to want to see your food right after the 25 minutes or the processing's done, but you don't want to ruin your food. You don't want to ruin your food by checking to see if it's depressurized enough, hitting this little valve. I know sometimes my valve gets stuck, but if it's been 45-50 minutes, sometimes I just take a little something and tap it, and if it pops right down, then I know it's ready, just because it's really been 45-50 minutes. But sometimes just with, the water and calcification that builds up on here, sometimes it won't pop down on its own. But you really want to wait for it. Because if you sit and you mess with this and say it's only been 20 minutes and you're over here tapping on it, you're going to hear it go tss, tss, tss. And what it's doing is it's releasing that pressure too quickly. And you do run the risk of breaking your jar. So I do not encourage you whatsoever. Be patient. Because the end result is too great to ruin all the hard work that you've done. All right. So with your pressure canner, it has also where it tells you how to line it up. And so you just line it up on here. It sets down. You twist it to lock in place. So it's got a locking mechanism on it. Okay, so that is the weighted gauge. Now there are other pressure canners, and like I said, I do not have the dial gauge pressure canners. They come in a single stack, or sometimes they're actually taller, and when you have the taller ones, you can do double layers of, say, pint-sized jars. So instead of just doing 8 to 9 pints like you would in here, or I can also do 7 quarts, you could do double the amount of pint-sized jars. And then there's an even taller one, so that way you can do double the quarts. So it really just depends on how big of a product you want, how much you're wanting to do at one time. But on the dial gauge ones, you have to be more specific to how much pounds of pressure you're going to use based on your level of elevation. Also, with the dial gauges, you really need to make sure that your dial gauge is checked every year to make sure that it's working appropriately, because that's how you determine whether or not you've reached the right pressure. Okay, everyone, so since I do not actually have a dial gauge canner, I wanted to make sure that you at least had a picture and some information on different ones that you can buy exactly what they are. So I have provided a couple of pictures of a couple of different dial gauge canners. The top one is a Presto canner, and the bottom one is an All-American. They both come with a dial gauge. They also come with a locking mechanism or bracket for the bottom one, and a twist-turn locking mechanism for the top one. They both also have a pressure regulator that you can see on the right-hand side. Both of the regulators that are on the right-hand side can do a pressure of 5, 10, as well as 15 pounds of pressure. Here's a closer look. You can see that the pressure regulator sits on top of the vent pipe just like it does with the weighted pressure canner. The overpressure plug is located in the back where the black dot is. That way it can release as needed for overpressurization. The dial gauge provides you with a visual so you can see exactly how many pounds of pressure is inside your pressure canner. That way you can change the pressure in small increments as needed by turning the heat up or down on your stove. Once you have reached the desired pressure you want, whether it be 11, 12, 13, 14, or even 15 pounds of pressure, then you want to try and maintain that pressure for the full processing time. This may require keeping a closer eye on your canner during the processing, but it's actually a benefit for you. This is a benefit because with the weighted gauge canner, you can only do 10 and 15 pounds of pressure. But for example, if you live in an area where only 13 pounds of pressure is required,
The dial gauge canner will give you the ability to reach exactly 13 pounds, which will improve the texture and quality of your food. That way you do not overprocess and end up having soft, mushy food. It will also let you know right away if you have dropped below the pressure that you need for your area in which you live. Your food is safe with more pressure, but may not be safe with too little of pressure.
Instead of just using the 10 pounds of weight or the 15 pounds of weight based on your below 1,000 feet of elevation or above 1,000 feet of elevation, it recommends that you be more specific than that. And actually, I have a chart here that I'm going to read to you that tells you if you are under 1,000 feet of elevation, you're going to use 11 pounds of pressure. If you're 1,001 to 2,000, 11 pounds of pressure. 2,000 to 4,000, 12 pounds of pressure. 4,001 to 6,000, 13 pounds of pressure. 6,001 to 8,000, 14 pounds of pressure. And 8,001 to 10,000, 15 pounds of pressure. So it's more specific. And you have to keep a closer eye on your gauge or dial gauge, because if you fall below that pressure at all while you're doing the canning process, it could ruin and mess up your food. So you want to make sure that it stays within the pounds of pressure that is required for your elevation. So you definitely have to visually monitor it a lot closer than you do your weighted gauge. So choose the one that's right for you. I really like the weighted gauge. And I tend to divide up my canning to where I do it over different days and different weekends. And so doing one layer is enough for me. But if you're someone who has a much bigger garden, does a lot more processing for your family, then you may benefit from the double layer canners and the gauged canners that could help you be more efficient with what you're doing. So choose the canner that's right for you. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a video that goes step by step into how to do some pressure canning of green beans. So if you've got green beans from your garden, or if you can go to your local farmer's market, get some green beans, we will go ahead and do that together. So I look forward to seeing you for that video, and I thank you so much for hanging out with me today and letting me go over this with you. And I really hope that you don't end up being fearful of using the pressure canner, and that when we do the green bean video also, that you'll see just how easy it really is and how safe it is. So thank you, and thank you so much for subscribing, and please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and share our videos with your social media. And from Sweet Bailey Acres, we thank you so much, and we ask that you please just have a blessed day.